name's Scott Mitchell. I'm here with my brother Kevin.
Buenos dias.
Long time no see, folks. Yeah, it's been a while. We've gotten our act together. We're back on the air. And hopefully we'll be coming to you on a regular basis. I hope. We'll see what happens. And that's our, notice we got a new theme song. We also have some exit music that's different also. Couldn't get the music to fade out. Anyway, how are you folks doing? We're like I said, we haven't been on for a while. We are now broadcasting, instead of giving you guys the stream address, we are now broadcasting on a little internet radio station I put together called Phoenix Underground Radio. I'm going to be replaying the show. It's looking like Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 7 o'clock Phoenix time. That'd be 10 o'clock East Coast, 7 o'clock Pacific. So we'll see what happens. So you guys know now to go there, or that it's up and running. Go to www.phoenixundergroundradio. There's a button, if you ever want to listen to it, there's a button that says click now to listen, and you'll be able to listen to the show or all the awesome tunes I got up there. It's not like any other station you've ever listened to, and it's still kind of in its embryonic stages, so bear with me, I'm working on it. Anyway, there is a lot that's happened in the last year since we've last been on. Let's start off. I'll let Kevin go first.
Well, I think coming from Arizona, I think the first place to start is obviously the border, the problems we're having on the border right now. The whole southern border of the United States, we in Arizona have been used to this for years. However, the vast majority of our illegal immigrants have come from Mexico. The distinct difference now is not only are they children, but they're coming from Central America. And I talked to a lot of people, and many scratch their head and don't understand it. This came out of left field. They're like, what is, all of a sudden these children are coming unaccompanied across the border? What, this makes no sense. It does make sense if you understand what's really going on and who Barack Obama really is. Let me give you a little bit of history as to why children are coming across the border. In 2008, Congress signed what was called the William Wilberforce Tracking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act. There's a mouthful, I know. And President Bush signed it on December 23rd, 2008. And it received bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate as a measure to combat human trafficking worldwide. The law was never intended to encourage mass immigration from non-contiguous countries, but the law's Section 235 did change the policies and procedures for handling unaccompanied alien children. I'll paraphrase it. Basically, what it stated was that if unaccompanied children were coming from countries that were non-contiguous to the United States, those are countries, all countries other than Canada and Mexico, then they wouldn't automatically be sent back. So what would end up happening then was that they would be processed, possibly sent to, not foster homes, but homes where where there were people already here in the United States. So that's what we're seeing. It makes sense when knowing that law, why all of a sudden these children and adults are coming across the United States. The question is, what gave them the impetus to do so? Does a 3-year-old know about the William Wilberforce Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act of 2008? No, but Barack Hussein Obama does. And I think there's been some communication between our government and the governments of Central America and Mexico, who's also cooperating with this. And I'll get into that. Do you have anything else?
No, well, here's the thing. He's always wanting to blame George Bush for things. Well, in this case, he can to a certain degree. This happened during Bush's presidency.
And I'm no Bush apologist, by the way, because he was doing the same thing, except he was allowing to come in from Mexico.
Well, I have to say this. I'm not either, but he was a heck of a lot better president than Obama in a lot of ways.
Oh, I was just talking about illegal immigration.
Oh, okay. the thing about it is, it's like the bill was passed under Bush,
Yes.
but the thing that has to be said, and this is never brought out a lot. Don't you remember 2 or 3 years ago that Obama issued an executive order, basically telling them, "Yeah, come on in." It was an invitation. It was codified under Bush, and it was he was like he was inviting people because he knew he could do it.
And it makes you wonder: is this all? Was it planned? I mean, was this just a pretext? Was this the act in 2008? Was that just a bomb, like a time bomb for the future? Did they know that they were actually going to use that this bill in the future, or is this just something Obama knew about and just decided that he was going to take advantage of?
That's the problem with a lot of laws, though.
To pursue his agenda. That's
the problem with the passage of a lot of laws. The lawmakers and the presidents who sign them into law, they say, okay, well, yeah, I'm going to pass this law. Under my administration, it'll be used wisely. But will it be under a future administration? Not necessarily. And I don't think they give that much thought. They just want it for the expediency of the moment.
Okay, a really good example, I think, is the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, NDA Act, which basically is a law that can imprison citizens for just about anything.
And in most cases, it'll probably be if they disagree with the government.
And it was passed as a means to protect us, as usual. But it's a law that I believe was passed with the full intent of using it in a different way in the future. And that's what I tend to think that this law was enacted for.
Here's something
it's always for the children, by the way.
Exactly. Well, yeah, in most of the cases, or women. The other thing is, though, folks, you got to be wary of this. When I said that they're using it in some cases to imprison people or come at people who disagree with the government or the administration, do not, and I've run into this a few times, do not let anyone, I don't care what side of where they stand on the political spectrum, do not let anyone say, "Oh, so you're anti-government." Do not do that.
Don't let them.
That is their way of That's their way of marginalizing and demonizing you. You look them straight in the eyes and say, "No, I am for limited government as put forth in the U.S. Constitution."
Yeah. I'm for personal liberty, actually. But
exactly. But you know what I mean.
And so this next little bit of information plays right into this. This is from Jerome Corsi, and and you won't hear this on the mainstream media. Go ahead.
And just real quick, if you don't remember who Jerome Corsi is, he was the guy who wrote the book about John Kerry, the Swift Boat book.
Yeah.
In case you are unfamiliar with him, back in the 2004 election.
He writes for WorldNet Daily, which some consider a fringe website. I guess it depends. If you're a lib, you consider that fringe, but I don't. Anyway, this is something you won't hear in mainstream media, but Mexico and Guatemala, now this plays right into what we're talking about. Mexico and Guatemala have reached an agreement that is intended to make it easier and safer for Central Americans, including unaccompanied minors, to enter the United States illegally. Though largely unreported in the U.S. mainstream media, the two nations agreed on July 7th, that was last week, in a presidential-level meeting in Mexico to make it legal and safe for Central American immigrants, including unaccompanied minors, to cross Mexico's border with Guatemala in transit in Mexico en route to the U.S. border at the Rio Grande. Basically, what that is that was Guatemala and Mexico agreeing to allow Guatemalan illegal immigrants to use Mexican space en route to the United States to enter our country illegally.
And why would they do that?
Are you asking me that?
Well, no. It was somewhat rhetorical, but okay. I remember some time ago, Andrew Wilkow. If you guys don't know who he is, he has a radio show Monday through Friday on Sirius XM on the Patriot station. I believe it's still on. I don't usually get to listen to him anymore, but he once said, "Why are all these people floating across the border to get to America?" And his simple answer, and it's very true, you might not like the answer, but the simple answer is, because their country sucks.
Yeah, but we're all going to be equally sucky.
That's what I'm leading to. Yeah. By Mexico entering into that agreement you're mentioning, and allowing these people from these countries to come across the border, they want the opportunity America has to offer. But eventually, so many of them are going to come across the border. So many of them are going to bring their way of life over here that America is going to eventually suck. I mean, we're already seeing many incidents in these refugee camps along the border of disease. That's one indication that they're bringing. I mean, it's a huge one. All these kids with scabies and lice and
tuberculosis, which was eradicated in the first world decades ago.
And there's something else too. They think they found some smallpox.
I've heard that there's even cases in Central America of Ebola. So now, whether or not that'll ever reach the United States is questionable. But another thing that is very rarely brought up is, I mean, these kids are, finding their way here to the United States. What's keeping people that really don't have our best intentions, let's put it that way, from crossing into the United States?
Best interests, yeah.
I mean, our best interests, in their hearts, to bring things, weapons of mass destruction. Who knows? So it makes you. So the question that I was asked today by a friend was, so why would it behoove Mexico to allow Guatemala or Honduras or whomever to allow their illegals to cross into Mexico? How does that benefit them? What do you think, Scott?
Well, I think there's a lot of people in Mexico, especially in northern Mexico, that want the American Southwest back. The Reconquista movement, there's a lot of people here in southern Arizona that want it. As a matter of fact, one of them, I believe, is on Obama's cabinet. Her name eludes me right now. You know the lady I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's Aztlan is the country that they call the Southwest.
Right, but the movement is called Reconquista.
Yeah.
In other words, reconquest, reconquer,
whatever. You saw La Raza down at the border this week. That means the race.
Yes.
I mean, that's a Hispanic, as far as I'm concerned, of the Ku Klux Klan. I mean, what would you make of if you saw me walk down the street and wearing a shirt that you said the race on it, and it referred to the white race or the Aryan race or whatever? I'd be a racist, and you'd be right. But why aren't they considered the same?
Here's what is irritating the heck out of me about this whole thing is the seeming lack of interest by President Obama. He will not go down to the border. He said, when he was in Texas the other day, he said, this is not a photo op, this is not theater. But what's ironic about that comment is everything he does is about a photo op and about theater, but only for those things he wants it to be a photo op and theater about. But yet, just the days leading up into to this visit to Texas, he was in Colorado, drinking beers, playing pool with the governor of Colorado. He was seen doing the same thing down in Texas. That is why Rick Perry was very smart. He did not greet him at the airport, on the tarmac at the airport by Air Force One. He sent him a letter saying, look, I want to get together you and meet in private. He didn't want it to be a photo op. Rick Perry's, I've kind of been simpatico with his beliefs for the most part. There's a few things he went goofy about when he ran for president back in 2012, but he really, to me, he's gone up. His stock has gone up by his standing. He's like our governor, Jan Brewer, in a lot of ways, in that respect, at least.
And yet, this week, the Obama administration, I have to laugh at this. They've got cojones, I can tell you that. They said that the border is still safer than it's ever been. They've
been saying that all along. They were playing videos on Fox News of Jay Carney over the years, Janet Napolitano, a.k.a. the Silverback Gorilla, reiterating this, and Obama himself. It's not safe. We know that here in Arizona. There are Sheriff Paul Babot down in, what county is it, Yavapai? Down southern Arizona.
No, that's not. Yeah, he's Pinal.
Pinal, okay. He down there. There are drug gangs. They've got signs 50 miles in on the in from the Mexican border, saying if you go beyond the knife in your hands,
Telling Americans that
going south. This is as you're going south toward the border because the drug cartels are making inroads into America.
And you also heard this week that the Border Patrol was told by the Obama administration to back off 40 miles from the border.
Okay, and I'm going to say something. Kevin might even disagree with this, but you're not going to hear this. First of all, you're not going to hear this on mainstream. The big three news agents, networks, ABC, NBC, CBS. You're not going to hear it on CNN. You're going to hear a lot of it on Fox. Kevin doesn't watch Fox as much as he used to, but still, they are at least trying to make an attempt. I mean, if you want to watch it on TV, there's two places. You'll see it on Fox, you'll see it on The Blaze, and see discussion on it.
So we got to go back to this original question. Not original question. One of the questions I asked is, why is Mexico? Why is all this happening right now, and why? That's when you have to really get into what motivates Barry Soetoro. President Obama, and always remember, he's a citizen of the world first, and a citizen of the United States. Well, maybe second. Maybe second. But always remember that he is part of those in the world, the United Nations, who dreams and wishes and plans for a one world. I mean, I know it sounds conspiratorial. You can call me what you will, but George Bush talked about the New World Order in 1988. George Herbert Walker Bush. It's a fact, and the biggest roadblock in achieving that is the United States. You have to basically make us poorer, make us weaker, remove our borders, and that's what we're seeing right now. We're not seeing an attack on our borders. We're not seeing an assault on them. We're seeing the erasing of our borders right now.
And folks, I was watching. What was it? Was it Charles Krauthammer, Brett Baer, on Brett Baer's show yesterday on Fox? He was saying, up until now, I mean, what was it? Abraham Lincoln that said America's the last best hope of man on earth? That was Abraham Lincoln.
I believe so.
And he's right, and that was back in the 1860s. I mean, 150 years ago, more. But watching Charles Krauthammer on Brett Baer's show yesterday, he was saying, prior to this, the rest of the world in Europe, it was in relation. I know what it was. There was a columnist in Germany who wrote an article that echoed a chapter in Charles Krauthammer's latest book, Things That Matter. And it was something he had written a few years ago, about 4 years ago, back in 2010, something like that, maybe 2008. Anyway, and he's basically saying, up until now, the rest of the world had the U.S. to look to if things got out of hand. They don't have that anymore, guys.
No, more people have faith in Putin.
You know what they're doing?
Putin, the ex-KGB major of the Soviet Union, they have more faith in him. They feel they trust him more than they do Obama.
And a lot of it has to do with the fact that, dear leader, is taking money we once allocated for the military and putting into social programs. That's why.
Social programs that only make us weak.
That only make us weak, exactly. What good is a damn social program if the enemy's knocking at your door? Is a social program going to barricade your door? Is a social program going to stop the enemy from getting into your house, killing you maybe, beating you up the least, raping your wife and kids? No, it's not. And this is, I'm sorry, folks, wake up. This is what we're looking at. That freedom and liberty are not the rule in world history. They are the exception.
Yes.
I know you shouldn't draw your analogies from TV, but I've been watching a lot of shows that are historical pieces, in historical settings, such as Game of Thrones and Vikings. And I've become more sensitive to this as of late. You look at some of that stuff that's going on there, and it's living proof that freedom and liberty is the exception. Some of the stuff that goes on those shows.
Well, you're seeing art reflect real life, or is it real life reflecting art?
No,
I have no idea.
It's art reflecting real life.
Because you're seeing it in the movies, you're seeing it everywhere. It's watching TV and watching the movies is like watching the news in many ways.
I mean, honest to God, it is, and it's really scary.
Here's something, folks, that'll it frosted my rear. I don't, and it should yours. It's inexplicable, but when the illegals are put in buses and so forth, when they get over to the United States, they are given what's called a notice to appear form. And what that is it basically tells them that they have to appear, what is it, in front of the naturalization, what is it, the court? I don't know who's adjudicating it. I have no.
I'm not sure.
But anyway, it's
ICE?
It's a notice to appear. Maybe
it's an ICE court.
To ICE. I'm not sure. I haven't read that far. But anyway, what it is a simple piece of paper, and I have a copy of it right here. And they're allowed to fly on our airlines and only present that form instead of an ID to get on to take a flight. Where you and I have to have a legitimate ID, and we get molested and frisked and fondled and groped before we get on the plane. Yeah, and we're the citizens. They're the criminals. I hate to say that, but if you enter our country illegally, that makes you maybe a criminal. But it's got to be at least a misdemeanor. It's not a felony, but certainly a felony. Try entering Mexico illegally. See what happens.
Oh yeah, look at
what's his name?
Tamarisi.
Tamarisi. But now it was exacerbated because he had guns, and the Mexicans don't, cotton to that very well. But it's still, even if he hadn't had guns in his trunk, had he entered there illegally, he would have been thrown in jail just like he is right now, roughed up, and possibly had the key thrown away. But instead, we give him 3 hot meals, give him health care.
I gotta wonder, though, talking about how I was saying a little while ago, how they're diverting money once set aside for the military to social programs. Yet I'm on Fox News, and there's an article here called "Army to Replace 9mm Pistol with More Reliable Gun Packing Better Knockdown Power." Just thought I'd throw that in as a sidebar. It kind of struck me as odd.
So, I guess this comes. I guess we have to get back to, this whole idea of America really losing its sovereignty. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but it was in 2012. This is when we were thinking about going into Syria, which, thank God, our better angels prevailed on that one. But Leon Panetta, who was the Secretary of Defense at the time, testified in front of Congress about what was going on in Syria, and he was testifying in front of Jeff Sessions of, I think, was he Alaska?
Jeff Sessions?
Or Alabama.
Alabama.
I'm sorry. In the conversation went like this. It said, Jeff Sessions, do you think you can act without Congress and initiate a no-fly zone in Syria without congressional approval? Panetta answers, again, our goal would be to seek international permission, and we would come to the Congress and inform you and determine how best to approach this, whether or not we would want to get permission from the Congress. I think those are issues we would have to discuss as we decide what to do here. And Sessions answers, well, I am almost breathless about that, because what I heard you say is, we're going to seek international approval, and we'll come and tell the Congress what we might do, and we might seek congressional approval. Wouldn't you agree that would be pretty breathtaking to the average American? And it goes from there. Basically, what this administration, these are globalists. They don't. Congress is irrelevant. Obama's already proven that with how many executive orders. He thinks nothing of bipartisan. They laugh at the Constitution. They are beholden to the UN, to the world body, which does not have yours and my better interests at heart.
And here's the thing that really irritates me: Obama's got cover to a certain degree with the low information voters on this, because how many times do you hear people associated with him, his lackeys, say he's a constitutional scholar? If he says he can do it, he can do it. Because he's gotten these people convinced that he knows the Constitution better than anyone else.
And I know this, we beat this into the ground, but it's so true. He gets cover from the media. None of this could go on. If we had a real free media and not state-sponsored media, none of this would go under the radar. It would be reported. My gosh, I hate to bring these up because we've been marginalized by the media for bringing them up. But things like Benghazi, the IRS, the NSA scandal, everything. Acting unilaterally, all the time. All these things. If it had been a different president other than this, he wouldn't get away with it. George Bush would not get away with it.
No, they'd hold him to it. I mean, they always do. They always did. I mean, I'm trying to find this thing with Krauthammer yesterday on Brett Baer's show.
While you're looking for it, did you also see that there was a poll taken by it was a liberal group actually, that basically the millennials, those age 18 to 29, 42% of them consider themselves socialists now.
And I'll bet 90% of them don't even, or 95% of them don't even know what socialist means.
No, it means, they think it probably means social, like, the life of a party or what have you.
Like Twitter and Facebook.
They've been so dumbed down. The millennials have got to be the dumbest generation there's ever been to swallow that, because all socialism is succumbing to big government, big state, and taking your marching orders from them.
Yeah, I just.
Did you also hear that Burger King announced, what is it, the rainbow burger or something?
Yeah, it's the same Whopper in different packaging.
What?
New and improved.
What? We're doomed. We're doomed.
I know.
It's not. Listen. It has nothing to do with how I feel about gay people or anything. What it is why?
Why? Why do you need to do this?
What's the purpose?
If they're going to do it right. They should have like 4 different rainbow burger covers with a picture of each of the members of the Village People on it. One should have the policeman, one should have the Indian, one should have the guy, the construction worker, and what was the other? Cowboy. They should. I'm sorry, I had to say that. They should have they should put the fries in you should have the regular size, and you should have the Macho Man size.
So there, we're on a daily basis. We just are bombarded on all sides. Now you have Israel and Hamas going at it. That's so dangerous over there. That you've got the border over here. It's almost like you get punch drunk on a daily basis, and Syria could heat up at any given point again. And it's a really. Scott and I grew up during the Cold War when we had. In fact, I was a Russian linguist in the military, and I helped, in the Cold War, and we always lived under the possibility of a nuclear war. So we were always aware of that. However, I never felt the degree of uncertainty back then as I do now in this world. No, and without a United States, like Dinesh D'Souza, imagine a world without the United States, his latest movie. Imagine a world without the United States. Go look at ISIS that's going in Iraq. Can you imagine having those crazy people over here beheading Christians?
Well, you're mentioning that. Go ahead.
I mean, they're crucifying Christians. They're crucifying and leaving them out for 3 days.
Speaking of that,
crucifying Christians.
Not to mention the fact that they're destroying religious landmarks and temples right now.
They destroyed,
and we're not just talking about Christian either.
They destroyed who's the one who was swallowed by the whale?
Jonah, the Temple of Jonah. Yeah. As a matter of fact, they're going to be making a move on Mecca. Do you think the billion Muslims in this world are going to put up with that crap? Well,
you remember the first thing they did in Afghanistan? They blew up that ancient. What was that?
I forgot the name of it.
Because they're not allowed, because everything's an idol to them. Yeah. Everything, showing up pictures are considered idols.
You're saying that, thank God we didn't get involved in Syria in 2012. I'm saying, I heard an interesting take on this, on something similar, why we haven't got involved now. Yesterday I was watching General Tom McInerney on Fox, and he was saying, I'm glad we didn't get involved in there. Because he says that these people are going to burn themselves out. They are going to have not only the West after them, but they're going to have they're going to have Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and everyone against them too. They're already getting. There's already outcry. They don't number any more than 5,000 to 10,000 people. Their group so far.
Go ahead.
And he thinks that the problem's going to take care of itself with these guys.
No, it's not.
I don't know.
It's part of a bigger. It's part of a bigger picture. It's chaos. It's order out of chaos. You're going to see so many flashpoints in this world, and that. And again, call me a conspiratorialist, call me whatever, but George Herbert Walker Bush talked about the New World Order back in 1988. Go look at the back of your dollar, and it announces the New World Order. And one of their big mottos is order out of chaos. Create as much chaos as possible. Basically, Hegelian dialectic, we create the problem, then we come in and fix it. So that's what order out of chaos is. You create so many flashpoints that the people finally get weary of war. They get tired of the chaos, and they scream for someone to come in with a solution.
And here's the point that can't be forgotten: is they create the problem. They create all these problems so that you forget who created them in the first place, and then when they come and rescue and save the day, they're the heroes.
Well, that's what we're seeing on the border. I mean, this is a manufactured crisis by Barack Hussein Obama, and he's using the Cloward and Piven strategy. Look that up if you want to know who Cloward and Piven were. And basically, what Cloward and Piven espoused was to overwhelm the system, and so there is no system left, and then rebuild it.
And what was his former chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel, who is now the mayor of Chicago,
never let a good crisis
fond of saying, never let a good crisis go to waste.
But Cloward and Piven, during the 1968 Watts riots, loved it. They were frothing at the mouth. They thought this was their Cloward and Piven moment, that the world was going to burn down just like Watts was going to, and they could then still their communist paradise.
Do you think it's any coincidence? There are so many things going on right now, so many problems, so many crises with this government. I don't think it is a coincidence. No. I mean, you look at the border issue. You now look at the IRS issue. Which, one other thing before we continue, there's a point I gotta make that I keep forgetting about. You go to this lawsuit that John Boehner wants to bring against President Obama. It's mainly having to do with the Obamacare. It doesn't have to do with the borders. But I heard him say this, and this is indicative of the lack of action, the inaction on the other side. His reasoning for doing this is because they have to show that they're for the Constitution. He says, we got to show that we're for the Constitution, that preserve the Constitution. That's not preserving the Constitution. How you preserve the Constitution is to use the powers granted to you by the Constitution. In other words, impeachment. Now, there are a lot of people saying we can't impeach until we have a majority in the Senate. No, you can impeach with a majority in the House. The House impeaches, the Senate convicts. We don't need to have him convicted necessarily. Did we need to have Nixon convicted for it to have effect? No. Did we need to have Clinton convicted for it to have effect? No.
Well, unfortunately, this president's race is used as a hammer. It's used as a cudgel to. It's an enviable position to have to be Obama. What do you think, Scott, would happen if those white guys on Capitol Hill decided to impeach our first African-American black president? Do you think there would be civil unrest? I do.
You would also have your Al Sharptons and the usual bunch, cast of characters, Jesse Jackson.
But that, again, plays into the chaos. Order out of chaos. Create as much chaos as you possibly can. And that's why Obama acts illegally, because he can get away with it, because people are afraid. People are afraid to be called a racist. They're afraid to be, come out against the first, African-American president, so.
Well, it's funny how the civil rights movement was to gain equality, but it's equality for everything except when you mess up.
Yeah.
It seems.
People are asking, again, I'm sorry, but so many people are naive. They're asking, well, why isn't Obama down at the border? Because things are going swimmingly, that's why. Things are going exactly as planned. He's loving it. He doesn't want to be seen in a photo op with those poor, lice-ridden, scaby-ridden, poor little kids.
Scaby-ridden,
Yeah, I mean, lice-infested, scaby-ridden, whatever, however it goes. He doesn't want to, be seen with in a photo op with that. And like I said, it's going as planned for him.
Let's move on to the IRS.
Oh boy.
Okay, I've got to say this first and foremost. This lie that they're trying to get you to swallow, that Lois Lerner's emails were lost, is a bunch of BS and nothing but a lie. I'm going to lend my professional expertise here. I'm in IT.
I want you to give me some odds about this.
The odds that you can't find a single trace of all of those emails, I won't give exact odds. I'm going to be very vague and general here and say they're infinitesimal. There is always some kind of record of every email you send. Now, what I don't get is this so-called policy they have that they have to print a hard copy of every email that they get that's outside of the IRS.
Did you also hear?
It's so stupid. It's also, isn't the IRS the agency that's in charge of enforcing Obamacare? And what is one of the biggest things in the government, the biggest things that government's been involved in as it pertains to patient health? Electronic records. I know, because I work for a healthcare organization. I'm in IT for a healthcare group.
Are you trying to tell me with the NSA that they can't dig up lost emails?
Exactly.
I doubt it.
And this whole thing that about printing up copies of everything is a bunch of crap.
And I also heard this week that they
if that's their policy, it's stupid.
That they also had an IM, instant messaging system that they utilized. That I believe Lois Lerner denied that existed.
No, they've got the transcripts. They've already got some transcripts of it from some of the. And for them to say, now, here's the other line that's coming about that instant messaging service. They're saying that, well, you sometimes can get the transcripts, and sometimes you can't. BS. That's a bunch of BS. We use a similar system we use something that's part of the Microsoft Office suite called Link. It integrates with your email servers. You have a record of everything. Going back, one of the first uses besides email of the internet before it hit the general public, when it was still a government thing, was texting, text messaging, instant messaging.
Now, if the IRS, if the NSA, from what I understand, you can press a key on your computer and then delete it, but they still have record that original keystroke.
Here's the other thing too. This whole thing about they're saying her hard drive crashed. I'm sorry, folks. If you're relying on people making hard copies of their emails in the event of a hard drive crash because you're allowing them to store their email on the hard drive, you don't know what you're doing. We discourage people from saving anything on their hard drives of their computers. If you want to have shortcuts, yes. Files, do not save. People always want to save stuff to their desktop, their Windows desktop. We tell people to save them we give each person their own network storage where they can save everything. I want to have it accessed from my desktop. Well, create a shortcut. How do you do that? I'll show you. If they're doing that, then the government has got to really be looked at. If they're telling their people, I doubt they are, but if that's their policy, there's something wrong. And
then the media pats them on the back for being such brazen liars. They basically give them a pass. What's the guy, that arrogant fool that gets up there from the IRS?
Koskinen?
Koskinen.
Mr. Magoo?
Oh my God, that guy. What a arrogant, in-your-face fool. These people are lying. I
think he's more arrogant than Lois Lerner.
Face lies.
I think he's more arrogant
and
than
they
she is.
think nothing of it.
Do
you realize that if we went to the IRS and were audited by the IRS and we came to the IRS empty-handed saying my hard drive crashed, we could still go to jail.
Yep. And this, a lot of people are saying, well, what good is this? I don't know if anyone's heard about this, the civil suit that's been brought against Lois or the IRS for information. what's that going to do? Well, you know what? The judge that's been assigned that case doesn't put up with this "I'm pleading the fifth" crap.
Yeah, he's supposed to be hard-nosed.
He's very hard-nosed. What was the other case that he? Oh God, he was another case that.
Yeah, I heard this. I heard this yesterday.
Yeah,
I forgot.
And
But and I don't even know what his political affiliations is. Basically, he just doesn't take.
No, he doesn't.
Crap.
He'll get the answers, I think. The other thing is that there's talk that the Congress might be arresting Lois Lerner, putting her in jail soon.
Well, I'll believe it when I see it. Basically, this administration just thumbs their nose at. Honestly, I don't think Obama will let him. Everybody questions.
He has no say in it.
Well, he doesn't have a lot of say in a lot of things.
If he, I'll tell you what. If he tells the Congress they can't do it, it's going to create a constitutional crisis, and there's going to be stuff's going to happen.
Well, I hope so.
Honestly, I hope we need something like that right now. We need, and you're saying, well, Scott, what do you want a constitutional crisis for? You know why? If we have a constitutional crisis, it might actually start to reassert the Constitution.
Well, the states have already been talking about having constitutional conventions.
Section 5?
Yeah.
Article 5, I mean?
Article 5, yeah.
Yeah.
Mark Levin is a big advocate of that.
And for those of you who are unfamiliar with that, an Article 5 convention is started. It's one of the two ways you can amend the Constitution. The other being through Congress. The
states originated.
The states would originate it, or it can be originated in Congress. But then it's got to be approved by the states, regardless.
Because there was a day when our country was founded, when we were federation. We had strong state powers, which we no longer have. In fact, our form of government was constructed so as not to have a very strong central government, and it's just gone the opposite way.
The easiest way to look at it is, like Thomas Jefferson said, is the government that governs best is that which governs least. Mm-hmm. In other words, the best government is the one that's closest to you, which would be basically in your home.
Well,
if you really want to take that to that extreme?
What year was it? It was in the early part of the 20th century when the states used to appoint senators. Is that?
Yeah, I've always said there's three things I would change that could go a long way to bring this country back in line. Number one, get rid of the 16th and 17th Amendments, which are I don't remember which one is which. One of them was the income tax amendment. And by the way, folks, for those of you who are saying, it's not legal to make us pay income tax, oh, yeah, it is. It's an amendment. They actually passed an amendment.
I believe it was on Christmas Eve or something.
Yeah, guys that believe otherwise are fools. As much as I hate to admit it, you're fools. I'm sympathetic to your views about not having to pay.
And now you can question the legitimacy of how it was passed, but it was passed.
Right. The other one is I would do away with the Federal Reserve. George... Huh?
It's neither federal nor reserve.
No. And George Washington, he warned about having a central bank. He went to war with Alexander Hamilton, who used to be his best bud, about it. And it failed. And the third thing I would change, yes, like Kevin said, the senators used to be appointed or elected by the state houses of individual states. Because you know how they refer to the House of Representatives as the People's House? Mm-hmm. That's because we had direct election of representatives to the House of Representatives by the people. They were just normal, everyday people. They weren't all lawyers like they are now. They used to be farmers and blacksmiths.
And then after they served their term, they went home.
They went home. They served a term or two, went home. And you can look, the early history of this country, it's replete with that kind of stuff.
I think of Thad Cochran when I think of a career politician. This man's one step from death.
Didn't he start serving
Mississippi?
He started serving before the guy who he ran against was born, I believe, or almost.
Yeah, and he's a Republican. I'm neither. I'm an independent. I'm basically a libertarian, so I don't care if you throw those arguments at me. I don't pay attention.
Going back to the senators, though. The states used to vote the senators in because the senators represented the interests of the state. Mm-hmm. That's why the individual state houses used to elect the senators. That got changed under Woodrow Wilson. In the words of
imagine that.
In the words of
Glenn Beck.
I hate that guy. And that got changed to where the people voted senators into office, and thereby no one represented the states anymore.
Exactly.
And that opened the door between when that happened, and then we got this income tax was passed, and the Federal Reserve. That started the central government on its path toward more power, because then they could dangle the carrot of federal money in front of the state's nose, and there was no one to say, no, you can't do that, because no one represented the states anymore. Because back in the day, if the state house elected a senator, and they weren't doing what the states wanted them to do, they'd fire him and elect another one.
Yep. And that's why you have people like John McCain, Lindsey Graham, that these people that just never, ever leave, and they become more and more distant from the people.
And notice two things about what he said about John McCain and Lindsey Graham. They're both Republicans.
Yes.
And John McCain is our senator.
Yeah.
One of our senators.
Yeah.
So you got to understand something about this show, folks. We don't care what party they are.
Yeah. I already assume that people like Nancy Pelosi and Barbara Boxer and what's the other wicked witch up there in California? Confiscate guns. Yeah, Feinstein. I already assume they're fascists. You know, I used to expect more from Republicans, but I hold them in more disdain because at least the libs tell you what they're about. These guys lie, tell you one thing and do another thing.
Yep. That's why I was kind of happy when Eric Cantor lost his primary election.
I loved it.
I just absolutely. It's funny, and this is a perfect illustration of why people don't get me. One of the guys at work who is just a young millennial. He's a little older than that. He's 30. This guy, he says to me, "Oh, I bet you're kind of bummed out when Eric Cantor lost last night." I go, "No, I was elated. I was ecstatic." "What do you mean? You're a Republican, aren't you?" And I go, "Well, yeah, I'm registered, but that's only because I haven't done anything about it."
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But that doesn't mean I have to be happy just because someone like that gets beaten.
And I'll be happy to
or elected or whatever.
I'll be happy to tell you, I associate with the Tea Party. I mean that is a group that has been so maligned, so unrighteously maligned. All the Tea Party wants to do is get our government back to where it was meant to be. You know, they believe in following the rule of law, which is the Constitution, and they were into more limited government. This Leviathan that we have right now in Washington was never meant to be, and that's all the Tea Party stands for. And they have been made out to be terrorists, linked to terrorism. They've been accused of racial slurs, which none is true. The media has been trying to tie them to all sorts of things.
You have to realize that they're not comprised of nothing but middle-aged white guys. You have to realize that. They're not. There's women in there. There's people of every ethnicity in there. Tea Party, actually, T is an acronym. It's for taxed enough already.
I was just going to say.
That's all that it is.
And we're called tea baggers. Y'all know what tea baggers are, don't you? You understand it's a profane, gross visual. It's pornographic.
Yeah.
And who used it? Harry Reid. Harry Reid. Oh, beautiful. The Undertaker used it. I believe he used it on the Senate floor.
Yep.
To describe the Tea Party, calling them tea baggers. If you don't know what a tea bagger is, I'm not going to tell you because it's too gross.
Look it up in a slang dictionary
Look it
online.
Up. Yeah, it's
we got to keep it PG here. But folks, you just got to open your eyes to this stuff. That's all. You just have to.
Yeah, I was talking.
Open your ears and your eyes.
I was talking to a very good friend today. She lives in Boston. That'll tell you what her political affiliation.
And yes, I know who she is too, folks. So he's right when he says this.
Yeah, she epitomizes everything.
She may be listening.
That's fine. I say this right to her face. Anyway, she asked me. She said, I do like your passion and about things. She says, but do you ever step back and to enjoy life? And I said, I enjoy life every day. However, I don't want to be blissfully ignorant either. If you still live in this paradigm where it's Republicans versus Democrats, donkeys versus elephants, well, then you're being led around by your nose. You're not. You're so far away from the truth that one day you wake up and this country won't even be the country that you remembered.
That's why I like what Andrew Wilcox says at the beginning of his show every day. He says American first, conservative second, Republican third.
Yeah,
that's the correct order of things.
I'm not even Republican third. This last election did it for me. I'm tired of being fed one crap sandwich after another every election. Sorry to put it in that way, but every election, you tell me if we're not going to have another Bush and another Clinton to choose from this next election. That's why I broke away from this whole thing. It's one side. It's the same thing.
And now they're talking about bringing Romney back to run.
Oh, please.
I mean, okay, honestly, if you had your choice, who would you like to see run?
Who would I? Well, I like Rand Paul.
I do too.
I like Ted Cruz.
I like him too.
Everybody, much hated people I know, and Dr. Ben Carson.
Mike Lee, if he.
Mike Lee. Yeah, I forgot about him.
Yeah.
Dr. Ben Carson. I don't know if he's
Ben Carson said if he feels called to do it, he would do it.
Yeah, but he'd just be called an Uncle Tom, so.
Who cares? The only way I could see Ben Carson winning is if he had some of the conservative blacks really, really go to bat for him. People such as Deneen Borelli, which she would. I think she would. J.C. Watts, Tim Scott, guys like that. They would go to bat for him. They need Larry Elder is another one that would go. That people like that are high profile conservative blacks.
Speaking of
Angela McGowan.
Blacks and being used as pawns, I want to get back to that. I just touched briefly on it. Tad Cochran running for Thad Cochran, Tad, whatever, Thad. It's kind of a weird name for a grown man, but anyway, how many terms has he been in the Senate? He's
like six or
he's
7.
Like 80 years old. Well, anyway, they fielded a libertarian Tea Party guy to face him, and he ended up beating Thad Cochran during the election. But Mississippi law states you have to get 50% of the vote, which he didn't, so they had to have a runoff. Well, a week prior to the runoff, what's his name, Scott?
I don't remember.
The Tea Party guy.
I don't remember what his name was.
Anyway, he was 12 points. He was 12 points up, and then, lo and behold, on election night, Cochran wins by, I believe, 1 point.
And the reason why?
Was
open primaries.
It's an open primary, and they sent out letters to uninformed black voters, Democrats, that if elected, this Tea Party guy was going to impinge on their voting rights. A total lie, absolute lie.
And for those of you who don't know what an open primary is, anyone, no matter what,
which is ridiculous.
What your party, whatever your party affiliation is, you can vote in the primary.
So all of these Democrat black African Americans showed up to vote for Thad Cochran because they were fed a lie stating that the Tea Party candidate was going to take their voting rights away from them.
Yep.
So that's a pawn. Sorry, you're a pawn. You're being used. And it's about time. You discarded people like Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson because they're nothing but charlatans.
Mm-hmm. And who's another one that's that in Congress? The guy I'm trying to think of.
You know who I respect? I don't agree one iota with him. Is Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders tells you I'm a socialist. Yep. I can appreciate that. And who's Kucinich? I don't like Kucinich. I don't believe anything, but he tells you.
He's reasonable from time to time, though.
Yeah, he tells you. He's honest about who he is. We were deceived here in Arizona when not Matt Salmon, but Senator Jeff Flake. He deceived us all. He told us he was one thing, and he ended up being another. He ended up being a John McCain.
Yep.
So those are the people I despise.
And the thing that really irritated me was he took John Kyle's seat,
Yeah, who's a great senator.
who was a great conservative senator. That was the shame of it all.
So we live in a world where what does Rush call them, the ruling elite?
Yeah.
They're not Republicans, they're not Democrats in the traditional sense. They're just people who believe they are entitled to govern us, to rule over us, to have power. Period. And it's Republicans, Democrats. It doesn't matter.
And the whole thing is, governments are not meant to rule; they're meant to govern.
Yeah. What did Jefferson say? When people are afraid of government, you have tyranny. When government's afraid of people, you have liberty.
Right.
And it's true.
I mean, there's so much wisdom in the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson wrote. I mean, he says the governments govern.
Best who?
No. They govern. They govern by the consent of the governed. Basically, they govern because we allow them to. Which tells me also that we could take that power away from them if we wanted to, and we can, people.
But we have to be an informed populace. What did when asked of Benjamin Franklin after the Constitutional Convention, what kind of government?
What have you wrought, Mr. Franklin? He told the lady. He said,
"A republic,
if you can keep it."
And that's where we're at today. And the only way that we can maintain this republic is to have an informed populace, which we don't. When you're watching the Kardashians and you're more interested about LeBron James, that was a big story this week. I could give a holy what about LeBron James. God bless him. He's an athlete and so forth. But if you're spending all your time worrying about where LeBron James is going to,
and I ran into that at work yesterday.
Sorry, but we're in trouble.
Everyone this week yesterday was huddled around computer watching all the analysis of LeBron James. If it wasn't that, it was the World Cup. That's like.
Oh, speaking of the World Cup, do you know that that after Germany decimated Brazil 7-1, do you know there were actually suicides down in Brazil over that?
I know.
I mean, come on, people. Talk about bread and circus. We're reliving Roman times here.
Yep.
It's a game, and not only that, but I also heard reports that some of the German fans they had to have police protection because of the Brazilians.
Doesn't surprise me. It's a wacky world, folks. It's all about priorities being out of whack. It's all about lack of balance in people's lives.
If people were paying attention to the things that really matter, government couldn't get away with half of what they get away with.
They couldn't. That's because we don't. People. We're not taught.
If you ask the average man on the street, what are the three branches of government? They would look at you like Republican, Democrat, Libertarian.
Well, if they could answer the question correctly, then ask them next. And
what's the purpose?
What does each government or branch of government do?
And why do we have them?
And for those of you who don't know, you have the legislative, executive, and judicial. The legislative passes the laws. The executive enforces them, and the judicial judges them to make sure that they are in line with the Constitution.
It's also called separation of powers.
Exactly. There are three. It's kind of like the Holy Trinity. Three separate branches of government, all equal.
Well, the founders thought it was divinely inspired. They were divinely inspired.
Yeah. Honestly, well, I guess we can call that a wrap.
We're a little rusty. We'll get better.
Yeah, I was tripping over my tongue, but then again, I'm a year older, too, so that's to be expected.
Yeah.
All right, folks, we are going to be broadcasting. Like I said, we're going to be rebroadcasting this show Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. And hopefully I'm not sure if we're going to do the live. I think we're just going to do it, record it when we have the time each weekend, because our schedules are just so, as a matter of fact, originally we were supposed to do this at 10 o'clock. Then today. Then Kevin called me up and he says, my schedule's free last night. And it's like, oh, God, I had to hurry up and make sure everything worked.
I actually had a tea time this morning, but I broke my toe yesterday and I couldn't play golf. So I called Scott and said, hey, I'm free this morning. Let's do it today.
It's usually me who hurts himself and has to cancel things. All right, folks, we're going to leave you with some new exit music. And we'll see you next week. Have a good week.
See ya.
Bye-bye.